Now with all the latest stories making the headlines, it's the ITV News.
More pressure on Downing Street. The Tory MP accusing the party of dirty tricks will go to the police. William Bragg claims there were repeated attempts to blackmail MPs who were considering withdrawing their support from the Prime Minister. We've all the latest. Also tonight, NHS workers join protests as health bosses insist there'll be no change to the plan to sack staff who refuse to get vaccinated. The ugly face of football, players pelted with bottles as Villa beat Everton. And the show will go on. The UK's oldest working cinema is saved for the nation.
This is ITV News with Romilly Weeks.
Good evening. If Boris Johnson hoped the weekend would be a chance for the infighting and discontent in his party to die down, he might have to think again. William Bragg, the Conservative MP accusing the party of blackmail, has confirmed he will take his allegations to the police. Meanwhile, Chris Bryant, the Labour chair of the Standards Committee, says he's spoken to a dozen Conservatives with similar concerns. They allege heavy-handed tactics are being deployed against those whose support for the Prime Minister is wavering, claims which Downing Street denies. Our political correspondent Daniel Hewitt has the latest.
For Boris Johnson, the last few weeks may well have felt like a slow-motion car crash, veering from one crisis to another. The latest, accusations of blackmail and intimidation by his government towards Tory MPs who want him out of Downing Street. Today came a new allegation from the Labour MP who chairs the House of Commons Committee on Standards.
Quite a few Tory MPs have told me pretty worrying stories about whips and government ministers and others, saying, look, if you don't go the right way on this, you won't get your school, you won't get your hospital, you won't get your bypass. And I think that is misconduct in a public office. And on at least one occasion, I'm told that the Prime Minister has been saying it himself.
The accusations support those first made by this senior Conservative backbencher.
The intimidation of a Member of Parliament is a serious matter. Moreover, the reports of which I'm aware would seem to constitute blackmail.
And William Bragg today confirmed he'll meet with the Metropolitan Police early next week, armed with examples to support his claims. Claims the Prime Minister himself continues to deny.
I've seen no evidence, heard no evidence to support any of those allegations.
But not even he can deny the perilous position in which he finds himself. With Sue Gray's much-anticipated report into alleged parties at Downing Street expected this week, Boris Johnson is spending this weekend at his Chequers country retreat, on the offensive, reportedly calling Conservative colleagues to shore up support, their future in his hands.
I've not sent a letter in yet because I've decided that what I want to do is wait until Sue Gray's report comes out. I've obviously had conversations with colleagues about everything that's been going on. A lot of us have, because we've had a lot of correspondence from constituents about it.
And so a defining week awaits. The man who has so often waved away his critics faces the threat of waving goodbye for good. Daniel Hewitt, ITV News.
In less than 2 weeks, tens of thousands of NH staff in England face losing their jobs because they're refusing to get vaccinated. For an already hard-pressed NHS, it's a looming disaster. The government insists it has no intention of delaying the deadline. But as Dan Rivers reports, some medical staff insist they'd rather lose their job than get the jab.
Anti-vaccine rallies have become regular events around the country, but this one in London had a difference. Among the crowds, significant numbers of NHS staff opposed to government plans to force them to have a jab or risk losing their job. Up to 70,000 NHS workers remain unvaccinated. Those attending today defiant about their right to choose.
I will lose my job, and I'm happy for that because I believe in, the principles of why we're all here.
Which is choice, effectively.
It's informed choice.
We're not going to be bullied or coerced into having something we don't want.
As it stands, all health and social care staff must be doubly vaccinated by the start of April, meaning that they need to have their first dose by the 3rd of February to meet this deadline. It's believed 70,000 or more staff could lose their jobs as NHS leaders again appeal for them to get jabbed.
If you're marching today, just take a moment, think about the people that you've been looking after who have experienced COVID. Think about your colleagues who you've been working with, and think about the best way to make sure that we're all protected and that we're all as safe as possible, because we are very much in this together.
Ever more creative ways of encouraging people to get a jab are now being rolled out. This jab and kebab offer in Kent is designed to reach people who've so far opted not to go to a vaccination centre. Those administering the vaccines here think it's the duty of all medical staff to be jabbed.
I think it's very important if you're in a frontline role, then you are vaccinated. You need to minimise the risk of passing that on to vulnerable people. You could be carrying the virus and not know it.
The government has pushed back on reports suggesting it's planning to postpone its vaccine mandate for NHS staff. In a statement today, it said ensuring staff are vaccinated is the right thing to do to ensure patients and those in care are protected. A spokesman added at present there are no plans to change the implementation date of this policy. It would seem to put the government on a direct collision course with tens of thousands of NHS workers who appear to be willing to lose their job rather than have the vaccine, putting further pressure on a health service already struggling with chronic staff shortages. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
The UN has condemned a deadly airstrike on a prison in Yemen. At least 80 people were killed after the facility in a rebel stronghold was hit. The Saudi-led coalition government, who are fighting Houthi rebels in the country, deny they carried out the strike. Lewis Warner reports.
Those caught in its path had no chance to escape. A jail hit by Saudi-led coalition airstrikes, now imprisoning those trapped beneath its ruins. Detention centres in Yemen are frequently full of African migrants trying to cross this war zone and find work in Saudi Arabia. Yesterday, the conflict came to them with random cruelty. The charity Save the Children says the attack has left scores dead.
The initial count of civilian casualties is horrifying. Right now, we think at least 70 people have been killed and more than 108 have been injured in the attack. This level of casualties we haven't seen for years. It might as well be one of the highest death tolls since 2017, I believe, or so.
It marks the end of a vicious week in Yemen. On Monday, at least 20 were killed by Saudi-led airstrikes on the capital Sana'a. The bombing was in retaliation for a Houthi attack on oil facilities in Abu Dhabi. This latest attack drawing condemnation for both sides.
The attack on Abu Dhabi is an escalation that is regrettable. Any bombardment that targets civilians or that is not careful enough to protect civilians is, of course, also unacceptable.
In Hodeidah, in the west of the country, other attacks have left more dead and injured, flooding the local hospital with casualties. The Houthis have been fighting a bitter war against the Saudi-led coalition since 2015, plunging the country into one of the most serious humanitarian emergencies. This latest attack has prompted fears about the conflict escalating further. It could propel this proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran into a much wider regional crisis. Lewis Warner, ITV News.
Merseyside police have arrested a football fan after bottles and objects were thrown onto the pitch during Everton's match against Aston Villa. 2 Villa players were knocked to the ground during their 1-0 win. Chris Scudder reports.
Once booted, now suited. A fearsome character on the field. Duncan Ferguson's return to stand-in Everton manager was spiced up by his opposite number, Villa boss Steven Gerrard, being a former playing rival from across Merseyside. To add extra spice, Villa's Lucas Digne was returning to Everton a week after leaving them.
Couldn't really get any.
His corner led to Villa's winning goal.
Flicked on, and it's in! It's flicked on quite brilliantly by Buendia. Wonderful set piece from Aston Villa.
Joy for Gerrard, agony for Ferguson. But that's when tempers frayed. Villa's players celebrated in front of the Everton fans, who responded with a hail of bottles and objects thrown from the stands. Dean and Matty Cash both collapsed to the ground. Neither was seriously hurt, but it's an incident that will worry the game's authorities.
Quite frankly, disgraceful.
The goal was the game's defining moment. Everton couldn't quite do it.
Konsa missed it, and then Calvert-Lewin couldn't finish it.
It was hard to take for Ferguson. New manager, but same old story for Everton. 10 defeats now in 13 games and falling fast. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
Tennis, and the UK's last remaining hope at the Australian Open, Dan Evans, is out. Britain's number 2 was up against Canadian Felix Auger-Aliassime in his third-round match, but lost in straight sets. The lockdown and COVID restrictions have seen many businesses go bust. It was feared the UK's oldest working cinema could be next to join them. But now film lovers are being welcomed back to the Electric Cinema in Birmingham after its new owners saved it for the nation, as Helen Keenan reports.
A building that has a remarkable history of survival. It's been a news theatre, a venue for adult entertainment, and for 112 years, a cinema. The UK's oldest working one. Shut since March 2020 due to the pandemic, the Electric Cinema in Birmingham, now under new ownership, has been saved once again and has reopened to the public.
It was in doubt, yes, and I'm very excited to be back here because it's a place that means a lot to me. I first came here when I was 16, so about 20-odd, almost 30 years ago now.
There's not one around every corner, do you know what I mean?
Different, like retro sort of style.
Yeah, unique. You can't beat a cinema like this. It's heritage, it's the atmosphere, it's the watching a film in a place like this. This is the only place to watch them.
In 1909, it was silent movies that graced these screens. By 1930, the cinema had added sound. But the popularity of the picture house began to wane with the introduction of television. Today's threat is streaming services. But the new owner believes cinemas do still have a future.
Bond came out, Spider-Man, $1 billion worldwide. It proved beyond a doubt that people want to come back to the cinema. And it's the best place to see a film, let's face it.
Steeped in a century's worth of history, it's hoped this special cinema will survive for many more years to come. Helen Keenan, ITV News.
And finally, Britain is celebrating its very first gold medal in the Alpine Skiing World Cup. Dave Riding was just 6th after his first slalom run, but leapt to the top of the table with his second and then couldn't be beaten. After victory in Austria, the 35-year-old is hoping for more success at next month's Winter Olympics in Beijing. Congratulations to him. And that is it. I'm back with the late news at 10:15. Until then, have a very good evening.